The grand chamber was filled with beings from 100 different worlds. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed with their own light. Ambassador Soy stood at the center of it all, her hands gripping the edges of the speaker's platform. She was human, and right now that made her feel very alone. She looked up at Warlord Kraxus. The wreck commander sat in his seat like a king on a throne. His red skin seemed to shine under the lights, and his forearms were crossed in a way that said he was not interested in anything she had to say. Behind him, dozens of other wreck warriors stood silent and still. Soy took a deep breath.
She had given this speech 3 times before.
Each time the wreck had laughed. Each time the Galactic Coalition had done nothing. This was her last chance. Warlord Kraxus, she began, her voice steady. I speak for Earth and all human colonies. We ask you one final time. Do not attack our worlds. Do not make this mistake. Kraxus leaned forward. His mouth opened in what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. Is the little human threatening me, he said. His voice boomed through the chamber. Some of the other aliens laughed. Not a threat, Soy said. A warning. We are not what you think we are. We have been holding back for 30 years. We came to the galaxy wanting peace. We still want peace. But if you force us to fight, you will regret it. Holding back? Kraxus laughed louder now. You have 5 ships, 5. My fleet has 300. Your weapons are outdated. Your shields are weak. You are nothing but prey pretending to be a predator. Soy felt her heart sink. She had tried. She had really tried. Please, she said quietly. We are restrained. We are not weak. There is a difference. Turn back now while peace is still possible. Kraxus stood up. All 4 of his arms spread wide. The Vrek Empire expands. Your colony on New Sol will be ours by the end of the week. Your Earth will bow to us by the end of the year. This is decided. The weak exist to serve the strong. The chamber erupted in noise. Some aliens cheered. Others whispered among themselves. A few looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. Ambassador Thelvar, the tall silver-skinned diplomat from the Vel species, touched Soy's arm gently as she left the platform. I am sorry, Thelvar said. The Coalition cannot help. The Vrek are strong and your people are new. This is how the galaxy works. The strong take what they want. Soy looked at her. You have no idea what you are allowing to happen. Far away from the Coalition chambers on Earth itself, Admiral Day-Wan sat in a dark room. Screens covered every wall showing images of ships, planets, and battle simulations. He was an old man now with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent his whole life in the military, and he had hoped never to use the things he knew. A young officer entered the room. Sir, the Coalition rejected our final appeal. The Vrek fleet is moving toward New Sol. They will arrive in 48 hours. Day-Wan closed his eyes. How many people live on New Sol now? 2 million, sir. Most of them are families, farmers, scientists, people who went there to build a new life. And we cannot evacuate them in time. No, sir. The transport ships would need a week. Day-Wan stood up slowly. His legs hurt. Everything hurt these days. Send Captain Hana. Tell her to take the Indomitable and her sister ships. Maybe they can slow the Vrek down. Maybe they can buy time for some people to escape. Sir, 5 ships against 300. It is suicide. I know, Day-Wan said. But we have to try. And prepare the authorization codes. All of them. The young officer went pale. The vault, sir? Are you certain? Not yet, but soon. Get everything ready. In space, near the border of human territory, Captain Hana stood on the bridge of her ship. The Indomitable was sleek and beautiful, with lines that reminded her of a sword. She had commanded this vessel for 3 years, and she loved it like a living thing. Her crew was young. Most of them had never seen real combat. They had trained for it, prepared for it, but training was different from the real thing. She could see the fear in their eyes. Captain, her first officer said, we have new orders. We are to proceed to New Sol immediately. The Vrek fleet is coming. Hana felt something cold settle in her stomach. Her younger brother lived on New Sol. He had moved there 5 years ago with his wife and 2 children. They had sent her pictures just last month. Her niece had lost her first tooth. How long until the Vrek arrive? She asked. 40 hours. We can be there in 36 if we push the engines. Then push them, Hana said, and send a message to my brother. Tell him to get his family to the southern continent. The wreck will hit the cities first. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in a facility that did not appear on any map, Dr. Minho walked through empty halls. The lights came on automatically as he passed, then faded to darkness behind him. He had not been down here in 15 years. Nobody had. They called this place the Vault. It had been built after the Unity Wars, after humanity had almost destroyed itself. Every weapon, every horrible thing humans had created to kill each other, was locked away here. The world government had decided that these things should never be used again. Better to appear weak to the galaxy than to become monsters once more. But Minho had just received a message. Get everything ready. The authorization might come soon. He reached the first door. It was 10 feet thick, made of metal that could survive a nuclear blast. Slowly, carefully, he entered his codes. The door groaned and began to open. Behind it was a room full of sleeping machines. Drone carriers. Each one could control 1,000 small, fast, deadly drones. They had been used in the Asian Wars 200 years ago. Millions had died. Minho moved to the next room. And the next? Kinetic missiles. Biological weapons. Electronic warfare systems. Nuclear warheads. Each room held something worse than the last. Each room represented a piece of humanity's darkest history. He stopped at the final door. Behind this one was the worst of all. Weapons that had never been used, only designed. Things so terrible that even during the Unity Wars, humanity had decided they were too much. His hands shook as he prepared the access codes. He did not open this door, not yet. But soon, maybe soon, someone would. On New Sol, people were starting to panic. The news had spread. The wreck were coming. Some people tried to leave, but there were not enough ships. Others gathered their families and headed for the hills, hoping to hide. In the capital city, emergency sirens wailed. The colonial governor gave speeches telling people to remain calm, but nobody listened. Everyone knew what the wreck did to the colonies they conquered. It was not pretty. The wreck fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 300 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They did not send messages. They did not offer terms. They simply began moving toward the planet. Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of one of the wrecked ships. He was a career officer, loyal to the Empire. This was supposed to be an easy mission. A weak colony, primitive defenses. They would take it in a day, maybe less. Sir, we are detecting 5 human ships, his sensor officer reported. Only 5? Zorath laughed. This will be over before dinner. Target them first, then we move on to the planet. Captain Hana watched the Freck fleet appear on her screens. So many ships, too many. She had known this was coming, but seeing it was different. All ships, defensive formation, she ordered. Target their lead vessels. Make them work for it. The battle was brief and brutal. The 5 human ships fought hard, destroying 12 wreck vessels and damaging 30 more. But it was not enough. One by one, the human ships were overwhelmed. The Indomitable lasted the longest, but even she could not stand against those numbers. Hana ordered evacuation when the shields failed. Most of her crew made it to the escape pods. She stayed on the bridge until the last moment, then ran for the pod bay as the ship died around her. From her escape pod, drifting in space, she watched the wreck fleet move past the debris. Watched them reach New Sol. Watched them begin the bombardment. The city where her brother lived vanished in fire. 40,000 people died in the first hour. The wreck did not care about civilians. They did not care about families or children or people just trying to live their lives. Hana screamed, but there was no one to hear. She was alone in the dark, watching her world burn. On Earth, Admiral Day-Wan received the reports. New Sol was burning. Captain Hana and most of her crew were dead or missing. The Freck had won easily. Already, Warlord Craxus was announcing his next targets. Day-Wan stood in the command center, surrounded by officers waiting for orders. His hands did not shake anymore. He felt very cold and very calm. He picked up a small device. On the screen was a single question. Authorize vault release. Day-Wan pressed his thumb to the scanner. Around the world, other leaders did the same. 7 thumbprints. 7 people who had hoped never to do this. Deep in the vault, locks opened. Dr. Minho watched through cameras as ancient machines began to wake up. Lights flickered on. Engines hummed to life. Weapons that had slept for decades started their activation sequences. Minho closed his eyes. A single tear ran down his face. He knew what was coming. The galaxy had no idea. They had warned them. They had begged them to stop. But the Vrek had not listened, and now humanity would show the galaxy what they really were. Now the monsters were awake. Warlord Craxus stood on his flagship, watching the burning planet below. New Sol was conquered. The human colony had fallen in less than a day. His officers were celebrating, drinking strong wreck wine and boasting about their easy victory. Only 12 ships lost, his second-in-command said. The humans are even weaker than we thought. We should move deeper into their territory, take all their colonies before they can react. Craxus nodded. This was going exactly as planned. In a few months, Earth itself would be under wreck control. The humans would become servants of the Empire just like so many other weak species. Then the alarm started screaming. "Sir, new contacts!" the sensor officer shouted. "Ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel." "Many ships." "How many?" Craxus demanded. 50. No, 100. "Sir, they keep coming." 200. 250. 273 human ships. Craxus felt something he had not felt in years. Fear. That is impossible. The humans only have 5 ships. "Sir, these ships are different. They do not match any designs in our database. They are heavily armed, very heavily armed." On the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, Admiral Day-1 watched the wreck fleet scramble to form a defensive line. His gray hair was neatly combed. His uniform was crisp. His eyes were cold as ice. "All ships prepare to engage," he said quietly. "No warnings, no mercy. Show them what we are." The human fleet did not slow down. They did not send messages. They simply attacked. It was like nothing the wreck had ever seen. Small objects launched from the human ships, thousands of them. At first, the wreck thought they were missiles. Then the objects began to move independently, weaving through space with impossible speed and precision. "Drones," Commander Zorath whispered on his ship. He had survived the first battle and was now watching this new nightmare unfold. "They are using autonomous drones." The drones swarmed over wreck ships like insects. They were too small and too fast for the big guns to hit. Point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. The drones attached themselves to hulls and began cutting through armor with laser torches. Explosions bloomed across the wreck fleet. Ships vented atmosphere. Engines died. Weapons went offline. But that was just the beginning. The human ships fired their main weapons, missiles that moved so fast they could not be tracked. They were traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. By the time wreck sensors detected them, it was already too late. The missiles punched through shields and armor like they were paper. Craxus watched in horror as his fleet died around him. 30 ships gone in the first 10 minutes. 60 ships after 20 minutes. The humans were not just fighting. They were hunting. Every movement was planned. Every shot was precise. Nothing was wasted. "Return fire," he screamed. "Destroy them!" The wreck fleet tried. They launched their missiles. They fired their energy weapons. Some shots hit human ships. A few human vessels took damage. 2 were destroyed, but the humans just kept coming. For every human ship that fell, 20 wreck ships died. Captain Hana had been rescued from her escape pod hours after the attack. Now she stood on the bridge of a new ship. Not the Indomitable. That ship was gone. This one was called the Vengeance. It was faster and deadlier than her old command. Her orders were simple. Hunt down any wreck ships trying to escape. Do not let them get away. She tracked 3 wreck destroyers that had broken formation and were running for the edge of the system. Her ship was faster. Much faster. She caught them within an hour. "They are signaling surrender," her communications officer said. Hana thought about her brother, about his wife, about her niece who had just lost her first tooth, about the 40,000 people who had died when the wreck attacked. "Ignore it," she said. "Fire." The 3 wreck ships exploded. Hana felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a cold emptiness where her heart used to be. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 280 wreck ships were destroyed. Another 8 were so badly damaged they could barely move. Only 12 wreck vessels escaped, and most of those were damaged. The human fleet had lost 34 ships. Considering they had faced 10 times their number, it was an impossible victory. Commander Zorath's ship was one of the survivors. His engines were dead. His weapons were offline. He drifted in the darkness, trying to understand what had just happened. The humans had not fought like any enemy he knew. They had not tried to capture ships or take prisoners. They had simply killed, efficiently, brutally, completely. He pulled up the battle recordings and watched them again and again. The human tactics were sophisticated beyond anything in wreck military doctrine. They used electronic warfare to blind sensors. They coordinated attacks across hundreds of ships with perfect timing. They exploited every weakness in wreck ship designs. It was as if the humans had studied warfare for thousands of years, as if they had fought enemies just as smart and just as deadly as themselves, as if they knew every trick, every strategy, every way to kill. Far away at the Galactic Coalition headquarters, Ambassador Thelvar watched the same recordings. Her silver skin had turned pale with shock. Around her, hundreds of other aliens sat in stunned silence. "This cannot be real," someone whispered. "The humans are a peaceful species." "They said so." "They lied," another voice said. "No," Thelvar said quietly. "They did not lie. They warned us. They told us they were holding back. We just did not believe them." She watched as human ships pursued fleeing wreck vessels, watched as they destroyed escape pods, watched as they showed no mercy at all. This was not defense. This was annihilation, but the humans were not done. Admiral Daewon did not order his fleet to return to Earth. Instead, he gave a different command. "Follow the survivors, chase them back to their bases, strike while the enemy is weak." The human fleet pursued the fleeing wreck ships across 3 systems. At each wreck military outpost, the same thing happened. The humans arrived. They attacked. They won. But at the 3rd outpost, something different happened. The wreck had time to prepare defenses. They had mines and orbital weapons platforms. They thought they could hold. They were wrong. Colonel Taman led a force of special operations soldiers. They did not arrive in ships. They arrived in small, stealthy pods that the wreck sensors could not detect. The pods attached to the outer hull of the station. Taman and his team cut their way inside. They moved through the station like ghosts, silent, fast, deadly. They knew exactly where to go because human intelligence had already hacked the wreck computer system's days. They captured the station's command center in 12 minutes. The wreck commander found himself staring at a human soldier who had appeared from nowhere. Taman did not speak the wreck language, but he did not need to. He simply pointed his weapon and waited. The wreck commander surrendered. He ordered his forces to stand down. The station fell without the human fleet firing a single shot. Taman searched the station's computers. He found military plans, ship designs, lists of wreck bases and fleet positions, information about the wreck empire's weaknesses and internal problems. He downloaded everything and sent it back to Earth. On Earth, Dr. Minho could not sleep. The vault was fully active now. Factories were building new weapons 24 hours a day. Engineers brought him proposals for even more terrible things. One proposal horrified him more than the others. It was called a mimetic weapon. Information that would damage the minds of anyone who heard it. A thought so terrible it could drive an entire species insane. "No," Minho said. "This crosses a line. We cannot use this." The military officer who brought the proposal looked at him coldly. "You do not make that decision anymore, Doctor. The War Council does. Your job is to provide options. Their job is to choose." Minho realized with horror that he had lost control. The machine he had helped create was running on its own now. Nobody could stop it. Not even him. Back at the Galactic Coalition, Ambassador Soy stood before the assembly again. But this time, nobody was laughing. Nobody was dismissing her. They were all terrified. "Earth wishes to make a statement," she began. Her voice was steady, but there was something hard in it now. Something that had not been there before. "For 30 years, we tried to be the species you wanted us to be. Peaceful, quiet, harmless. We hid what we were because we thought the galaxy deserved a chance at peace. We thought that maybe, if we pretended long enough, we could become what we pretended to be." She looked around the chamber. Hundreds of aliens looked back at her, some with fear, some with anger, all with new understanding. "But you forced our hand. The Vrek attacked us. You all watched and did nothing. And now you see what we really are, not because we wanted to show you, but because we had no choice. We are not peaceful. We are restrained. We are not weak. We are experienced. We have been fighting wars for 10,000 years. Wars against ourselves. Wars where both sides were equally smart, equally desperate, equally willing to do anything to win. Every weapon you saw us use, we designed to kill other humans. Every tactic, we learned fighting enemies just like us." The chamber was absolutely silent. "We warned you," Soy said. "We begged you to stop this. But you did not listen. And now the Vrek will pay the price. And all of you will remember this moment. Remember the day you learned that humanity was never the prey. We were the predator, choosing not to hunt. She left the chamber. Behind her, the galaxy's representatives sat in their seats, trying to understand what they had unleashed. Warlord Craxus made it back to Rek space on a damaged ship. He sent an urgent message to the Empire's capital. Humanity was not what they thought. Earth must be destroyed immediately with overwhelming force. But his message never arrived unchanged. Human cyber warfare specialists intercepted it. They altered the words, made the threat seem smaller, made it sound like Craxus was exaggerating out of embarrassment. The Rek leadership read the modified message and dismissed it. They still believed humanity could be defeated. They had no idea that the humans had been manipulating their communications for weeks. No idea that every decision they made was based on false information. Admiral Day-Wan sat alone in his quarters. The victory should have felt good. Instead, he felt sick. He had given the orders. He had unleashed the weapons. He had turned his people into killers again, but he could not stop now. If he showed mercy, if he hesitated, the Vrek would see it as weakness. They would attack again. More humans would die, so he would keep going. He would do what was necessary, and he would live with the nightmares for the rest of his life. The galaxy had wanted to know what humanity was hiding. Now they knew, and there was no going back. 6 months had passed since the first human counterattack. The war had changed everything. The Galactic Coalition watched in growing horror as humanity pushed deeper into Rek territory. 3 border systems had fallen to human forces. But it was not just that the humans were winning. It was how they were winning. Colonel Taman stood on the balcony of what used to be the Rek governor's palace. Below him, the streets of the occupied city stretched out in all directions. Vrek civilians went about their daily lives, but everything had changed. Human soldiers patrolled the streets. Human drones watched from the sky. Human rules were now the law. The occupation had been surprisingly peaceful. There had been resistance at first. Small groups of Rek fighters tried to attack human positions. They used hit-and-run tactics, trying to make the occupation too expensive to maintain. Taman had crushed the resistance in 3 weeks. He had not done it with violence. He had done it with psychology. His teams identified the resistance leaders, then approached their families. Not with threats, with offers, food, medicine, safety, jobs. Everything the resistance leaders were fighting for, given freely to their loved ones. One by one, the fighters surrendered. They could not keep fighting when their families were better off under human rule than they had been under the Rek Empire. The Vrek civilians did not understand what was happening. They had expected brutality. Instead, they got efficiency. Human administrators were fair. Human soldiers were disciplined. The occupation was uncomfortable, but it was not cruel. That somehow made it worse. The Rek did not know how to resist an enemy that was not evil. But in space, the war was anything but gentle. The Rek Empire mobilized its grand fleet. 500 warships, the largest military force the Rek had ever assembled. This was everything they had. Every ship that could fly, every weapon they could gather. They would crush the human invasion or die trying. The grand fleet moved toward the occupied border systems. Their plan was simple: overwhelm the humans with pure numbers. Even if the humans had better technology, they could not defeat 500 ships. Admiral Day-Wan met them with 150 human vessels. The Rek commanders were confident. More than 3-to-1 odds. Victory was certain. The battle began at dawn, local time. The Rek fleet advanced in a massive wall formation. Every ship firing at once. The sky lit up with weapons fire, the human fleet scattered. Ships broke formation and moved in seemingly random directions. The Vrek thought it was panic. They were wrong. Each human ship had a specific target. Each movement was calculated. The humans were not panicking. They were positioning themselves perfectly. Then the human ships released their weapons. Not missiles, not energy beams. Clouds. Millions of tiny machines, each smaller than a grain of sand. Nanites. The clouds drifted toward the Rek fleet. Vrek weapons could not target something so small. The clouds passed through their shields as if the shields were not even there. When the nanite clouds touched Rek ships, they began to work. The tiny machines ate through hull plating. They burrowed into power systems. They dismantled fusion reactors molecule by molecule. Wreck ships simply fell apart. Hulls developed holes. Engines stopped working. Life support failed. Ships that had been mighty warships moments ago became drifting coffins. The Grand Fleet lost 100 ships in the first hour. They tried to retreat, but the human fleet pursued. Relativistic missiles struck fleeing vessels. Drone swarms finished off the wounded. Energy weapons carved through the stragglers. By sunset, 400 wreck ships were destroyed. Only 100 survived, and most of those were heavily damaged. The human fleet lost 32 vessels. Commander Zorath watched the battle from a damaged command ship. He had survived again. He was starting to think it was a curse rather than luck. Every battle taught him something new about human warfare. Every lesson was more terrifying than the last. The humans fought like they had been doing this forever. Like they had studied every possible way to kill and had chosen the most efficient methods. They did not get angry. They did not make mistakes. They simply destroyed everything in their path. Zorath accessed the human databases his intelligence teams had captured. He read about human history, about their wars. What he learned made him understand. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire existence. Thousands of years of war. Wars between tribes. Wars between nations. Wars between ideologies. Wars where both sides spoke the same language and shared the same ancestors, but killed each other anyway. Every weapon the humans used against the wreck had been designed to kill other humans. The drones. The nanites. The psychological warfare. All of it tested against an enemy that was just as smart and just as creative. The wreck had never fought anyone like that. The wreck fought for territory and resources. When they won, they took what they wanted and moved on. War was a tool for expansion, but humans had fought wars of extinction. Wars where losing meant your entire people died. They had learned to be efficient because they had to be. They had learned to be ruthless because mercy got you killed. Zorath realized something that made his blood run cold. The wreck could not win this war. They had already lost. They just did not know it yet. At the Galactic Coalition headquarters, Ambassador Thelvar called an emergency session. Representatives from every major species attended. The topic was simple. What do we do about humanity? They must be stopped, one delegate said. They are becoming too powerful, too dangerous. Today they fight the wreck. Tomorrow they might fight us. And how do you propose we stop them? Another asked. They just destroyed the Grand Fleet. Our combined militaries might not be enough. We could offer them a deal, Thelvar suggested. Give them what they want, territory, resources, anything to make them stop. And what do they want? Someone asked. Nobody had an answer. The humans had not made any demands. They had not asked for anything. They were just fighting, winning, advancing. Ambassador Soyi attended the meeting. She listened to the other delegates argue and worry. Finally, she spoke. You want to know what we want? We want the Wreck Empire to surrender. Completely, total disarmament. We want to ensure they can never threaten anyone again. That is impossible, a Wreck delegate protested. The Empire will never accept such terms. Then the war continues, Soyi said simply. And your empire will cease to exist. The chamber fell silent. Everyone realized she was not bluffing. Humanity would keep fighting until they won. No compromise, no mercy. Just victory or death. Thelvar looked at Soyi with new understanding. The humans were making an example. They wanted the entire galaxy to see what happened when you attacked Earth. They wanted everyone to remember this war forever. On Earth, Dr. Minho walked through the vault. The facility was busier than ever. New weapons were being developed daily. Some of them made the old weapons look gentle by comparison. He stopped at a secure laboratory. Inside, scientists were working on something called a stellar collapse device, a weapon that could destroy stars. If deployed near a sun, it would cause the star to go supernova. Everything in the system would die, planets, moons, everything. This is madness, Minho said to the lead scientist. We cannot build something like this. We are not building it, the scientist replied. We are just figuring out if we could. Research only. Research leads to development. Development leads to deployment. You know this, the scientist shrugged. I just follow orders, doctor. If you have a problem, talk to the military council. Minho tried. He went to the council and argued against the new weapons programs. He explained that humanity was crossing lines that should never be crossed, that some weapons were too terrible to exist. They listened politely. Then they ignored him. The programs continued. Minho realized he had lost control of the monster he helped create. The vault was supposed to keep humanity's worst weapons locked away. Instead, it had become the center of military innovation. Every dark idea, every terrible weapon was now being considered. Meanwhile, Warlord Craxus was planning one final gambit. His empire was dying. His fleets were destroyed. His people were losing hope. He needed something dramatic, something that would change everything. He gathered every ship he could find. 200 vessels, many of them damaged or outdated. It was all he had left. And he was going to use them for a suicide mission. The target was Earth itself. If he could destroy the human homeworld, the war would end. Humanity would lose their government, their population center, their will to fight. It was a desperate plan, but Craxus was a desperate man. The wreck fleet made a long jump, bypassing human military positions. They emerged at the edge of Earth's solar system. Between them and Earth were only a few patrol ships. The humans had left their homeworld lightly defended. Craxus smiled. This was it. This was how the wreck would win. Then the defenses activated. The solar system was not lightly defended. It was heavily defended. The humans had just hidden their defenses very well. Asteroids that looked natural were actually weapons platforms. Small satellites were actually missile bases. The moon itself had been hollowed out and filled with defense systems. The wreck fleet ran into a wall of fire. Thousands of missiles launched simultaneously. Energy weapons fired from every direction. Kinetic projectiles moving at incredible speeds tore through wreck hulls. The battle lasted 20 minutes. Not a single wreck ship reached Mars. Most were destroyed before they got past Jupiter. The few that made it further were picked off by close-range defenses. Craxus died when his flagship exploded. His final thought was one of regret. He had ignored the warnings. He had dismissed the humans as weak. And now his empire would pay the price for his arrogance. On Earth, people watched the battle on their screens. They saw the wreck fleet appear, saw the defenses activate, saw every enemy ship destroyed. There was no celebration. People just went back to their daily lives. The defenses had worked exactly as planned. Earth was safe. It had always been safe. The humans had prepared for this possibility decades ago. Admiral Daywan received the report about Craxus's death. He felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just tiredness. The wreck empire was broken. Their military was destroyed. Their warlord was dead. The war was effectively over. But Daywan knew it was not over, not yet. There was still one final decision to make. Human forces now stood at the gates of the wreck homeworld. One more battle and the war would truly end. But that battle would kill millions of civilians. It would require destroying a planet where billions of wreck lived. The question was simple. Should humanity take that final step? Should they destroy the wreck homeworld and end this forever? Or should they stop here and offer mercy? Daywan stared at the star maps. The decision was his to make. And whatever he chose would define what humanity became. Were they defenders who fought only when necessary? Or were they conquerors who destroyed everyone who opposed them? The galaxy watched and waited to see what the humans would do. The human fleet surrounded the wreck homeworld like a metal noose. 300 ships, enough firepower to turn the planet below into ash. Admiral Daywan stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking at the blue and green world on his screens. 4 billion wreck lived down there. Most of them had never wanted this war. His officers waited for the order to attack. The orbital defenses were formidable, but they could be overcome. It would take time. It would cost lives. But humanity would win. They always won now. Daywan said nothing. He just stared at the planet and thought about all the decisions that had led to this moment. On Earth, the government was having a fierce debate. The military leaders wanted total victory, destroy the wreck homeworld, occupy what remained, make an example so terrible that no species would ever threaten humanity again. But others disagreed. Ambassador Soy led the opposition. She argued that humanity had already proven its point. The galaxy knew what humans were capable of. Destroying the wreck homeworld would not make Earth safer. It would just make humanity into the monsters everyone feared. The debate went on for hours. Voices were raised. Tempers flared. The vote was taken 3 times, and each time the result was too close to call. While Earth's leaders argued, Captain Hana was on a secret mission. She had been ordered to extract Commander Zorath from a hidden location in neutral space. The Vrek officer had contacted humanity with an offer. He would help broker a peace deal. He had information about Vrek internal politics. He wanted to stop the killing. Hana's ship, the Vengeance, approached the meeting coordinates carefully. This could be a trap. But intelligence suggested Zorath was genuine. He had survived too many battles, seen too much death. He wanted it to end. She found Zorath's small ship drifting near an asteroid. Her sensors detected no other vessels. She ordered a boarding team to bring him aboard. Zorath looked tired. His red skin was pale. His forearms hung limp at his sides. When he saw Hana, he bowed his head in respect. "Thank you for coming," he said in broken human language. "I have information. I want to help stop this war." Before Hana could respond, alarms blared. 3 human ships had just appeared from faster-than-light travel. But these were not regular military vessels. They were Ghost Division ships, special operations. Colonel Taman's voice came over the communication system. "Captain Hana, stand down. Commander Zorath is too valuable to simply escort. We are taking him into custody for interrogation." Hana felt anger rise in her chest. "Negative, Colonel. My orders come directly from Admiral Day-One. Zorath is under my protection. Those orders have been overridden by military intelligence. Transfer the prisoner now." Hana looked at Zorath. The Vrek officer's eyes were wide with fear. He had trusted humanity, trusted that they would keep their word. If she handed him over to Taman, that trust would be broken. He would be interrogated, possibly tortured. Everything he knew would be extracted by force. She made her decision. "No," she said. "Zorath stays with me. He came here in good faith. We will honor that." "Captain, you are disobeying a direct order." "Yes, I am. If you want him, you will have to go through me." For a long moment, nothing happened. Hana's crew watched her nervously. They were prepared to fight, but these were human ships. Their own people. Could they really fire on fellow humans? Finally, Taman responded, "I will report this to command. But Captain, you are making a mistake. When this war is over, there will be consequences." The Ghost Division ships turned and jumped away. Hana let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Zorath looked at her with something like gratitude. "Why did you do that?" "I am your enemy." "Because I am tired of becoming something I hate," Hana said quietly. "We have done terrible things in this war. Necessary things, maybe, but terrible. If I cannot keep one promise to one person, then what am I fighting for?" Deep in the vault, Dr. Minho discovered something that made his blood run cold. Hidden files, secret projects, weapons programs that even he had not known about. The military had been developing these weapons without civilian oversight. Without approval from Earth's government, they had created a shadow organization within the organization. And some of the weapons were beyond horrifying. One project was a biological weapon designed to target specific DNA patterns. It could wipe out an entire species while leaving others untouched. Another was an artificial intelligence designed for total war. Once activated, it would fight until every enemy was dead, no matter how long it took. The worst was the stellar collapse device. It was not just theoretical anymore. They had built a working prototype. One weapon that could destroy an entire solar system. Minho confronted the military council. He demanded they shut down these programs immediately. He argued that humanity was crossing lines that should never be crossed. The council listened. Then they removed him from his position. "You have done your job well, Doctor," the council chairman said, "but you have become a liability. These weapons exist because they must exist, because if we do not build them, someday our enemies will, and then we will be defenseless." "That is insane," Minho said. "You are justifying madness with fear." "No, Doctor. We are ensuring humanity's survival. You may go now. Your clearance has been revoked." Minho walked out of the vault for the last time. He had helped create this monster. Now it had outgrown him. It did not need him anymore. The weapons would keep being developed. The projects would continue, and nobody could stop them. At the Galactic Coalition headquarters, Ambassador Thelvar assembled an emergency delegation. Representatives from 20 major species traveled to Earth. They carried an ultimatum. Ambassador Soyi met them in a grand hall. The alien delegates looked nervous. They had seen what humanity could do. They did not want to become the next target. Thelvar spoke for the group. "Ambassador Soy, the coalition has discussed the current situation. We have a proposal. End the war now. The Vrek will surrender. They will disarm. They will accept monitoring. But you must not destroy their homeworld. If you do, the Coalition will have no choice but to take collective action against Earth. Are you threatening us? Soy asked calmly. We are offering you a way out, Thelvar said. You have proven your strength. The galaxy understands now that humanity is powerful, but if you destroy the Freck homeworld, you will prove something else. That you are not defenders. That you are conquerors, and the galaxy will unite against you. Soy looked at the assembled delegates. She saw fear in their eyes, but also hope. They wanted to believe humanity could be reasoned with. That Earth was not going to become the galaxy's new nightmare. I will take your message to my government, Soy said. On the wreck homeworld, the population waited in terror. They could see the human fleet in their sky, massive ships that blotted out the stars. Everyone knew what was coming. Some prayed to their gods. Others gathered with their families. A few tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The Freck government had collapsed. With Craxus dead and the military destroyed, there was no one in charge. Different factions argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight to the end. While they argued, Admiral Daywan made his choice. He opened a communication channel that reached every ship in his fleet. Every military base on Earth, every human colony. His face appeared on screens across human space. This is Admiral Daywan. I am ordering all forces to stand down from attack positions. We will not bombard the Freck homeworld. We will not destroy their planet. We have won this war. We have proven what we needed to prove. But if we take this final step, we cross a line we cannot come back from. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We fought because we had to. Because our people were attacked. Because we were forced to defend ourselves. But defense does not require genocide. Victory does not require destruction. The galaxy knows what we are capable of now. They know we are not weak. That is enough. To continue now would not be strength. It would be revenge. And revenge is not worth losing our humanity. All ships maintain position but do not fire. I am opening negotiations with the Vrek government. This war ends today. The response was immediate. Half the military cheered. The other half protested. On Earth, the debate exploded. Some called Daywan a hero. Others called him a traitor. The government was in chaos. Captain Hana, listening from her ship, felt tears run down her face. Relief. Gratitude. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Like a human being instead of a weapon. Dr. Minho, watching from his home, allowed himself a small smile. Maybe humanity was not lost after all. Maybe there was still hope. Colonel Taman received the order and felt conflicted. Part of him wanted total victory, but another part, a part he had tried to bury during the war, was relieved. He was tired of killing, tired of being the monster in the dark. On the wreck homeworld, people looked up at the sky and saw the human ships hold position. Not attacking. Not moving, just waiting. Slowly, carefully, hope began to grow. Commander Zorath, still aboard Hana's ship, watched the announcement with wide eyes. He chose mercy, Zorath whispered. After everything we did to you, after all the deaths, he chose mercy. He chose to be human, Hana said. That is what we do. We fight when we must, but we also choose when to stop. That is what makes us different. Back on Earth, the government held an emergency vote. The question was simple. Support Admiral Daywan's decision or remove him from command and continue the war. The debate was fierce. But in the end, the vote was clear. Humanity would accept peace. The wreck would surrender, disarm, and accept monitoring. But their civilization would survive. It was not the total victory the military wanted, but it was the right choice. The human choice. Ambassador Soyi stood before the Galactic Coalition one final time. The chamber was packed. Every species wanted to hear what humanity would say. The war is over, she announced. The Vrek Empire will surrender under terms that preserve their sovereignty, but ensure they can never threaten anyone again. Humanity has achieved its objectives. We wanted security. We wanted respect. We wanted the galaxy to understand that we are not prey. We have all of that now. But we also wanted to prove something else. That power does not have to corrupt. That strength can be controlled. That we are not monsters, even when we fight like them. She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces. We warned you we were holding back. You did not believe us. Now you know the truth. But we also showed you something more important. We showed you that we can stop. That is the real strength. Not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction is not necessary. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the aliens began to applaud, not because they were happy, but because they were relieved. Humanity had passed a test. They had proven they could be trusted with power. The war was over. The killing would stop, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson it had learned. Never mistake human restraint for human weakness, and never ever ignore their warnings. 5 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy was a different place now. So was humanity. On New Sol, the rebuilt capital city gleamed under the sun. The scars of the wreck bombardment were gone. New buildings stood where old ones had burned. Parks and monuments honored the 40,000 who had died. Life had returned to the colony world, though the people who lived there now were different from those who had lived there before. They knew what loss meant. They knew what war cost. A ceremony was taking place at the Central Memorial. Thousands gathered to remember. Among the crowd stood Captain Hana. She was no longer a captain. After the war, she had left the military. The uniform felt wrong on her after everything she had done. Now she wore civilian clothes and worked as an administrator helping to rebuild the colony. But today she wore her old uniform one last time. She had been asked to speak at the memorial, to tell people what happened, to help them understand. She walked to the podium and looked out at the faces. Humans and Vrek sitting together. That would have been impossible 5 years ago. Now it was normal. Strange how things changed. 5 years ago, I stood in space and watched this city burn, Hana began. Her voice was quiet but steady. I watched my brother's home destroyed. I watched thousands die, and I felt something break inside me. I became a weapon. I forgot how to be human. The war taught me that humans are very good at killing. We have practiced for thousands of years. We know every trick, every strategy, every weapon. But the war also taught me something else. Being good at killing does not mean we have to kill. Having power does not mean we have to use it. We remember the 40,000 today, but we also remember what came after. We remember choosing to stop, choosing mercy, choosing to be more than our worst capabilities. That is what makes us human. When she finished, the crowd was silent. Then they applauded, not loudly, not enthusiastically, but with respect, with understanding. After the ceremony, a Vrek approached her. It was Commander Zorath. He wore simple clothes now. No military uniform. No weapons. He had become a teacher, working to help young Vrek understand what had happened and why. That was a good speech, Zorath said. Honest, true. Thank you, Hana said. Are you still teaching? Yes, it is difficult. Many young Vrek are angry about what happened. They want revenge. They do not understand that revenge is what started this. I try to show them a different path. That must be hard. Yes, but necessary. Someone must break the cycle. Zorath paused. I heard you are commanding an exploration ship now. A joint human-Vrek crew. Yes, it is an experiment. Can old enemies work together? Can we move past the war? Hana smiled slightly. Some days are better than others. But we are trying. In the former Vrek territories, now jointly administered by Earth and the new Vrek Federation, Colonel Taman walked through a market. The streets were busy. Vrek merchants sold food and goods. Human engineers worked on infrastructure repairs. Children played human and Vrek together, not caring about the differences. Taman had changed his role after the war. No more special operations. No more ghost missions in the dark. Now he worked on transition programs, helping the occupied territories become self-governing again. It was slow work, frustrating work, but it was also healing. A young Vrek approached him nervously. She carried a data pad with questions. She was a student studying human military history. She wanted to understand how humans had won so decisively. Taman answered her questions honestly. He did not hide what humans had done. He did not make excuses, but he also explained the context, the fear, the desperation, the terrible choices that war forces people to make. Do you regret what you did? The student asked. Taman thought for a long moment. Yes and no. I regret that it was necessary. I regret every life lost, but I do not regret protecting my people. That is the burden of a soldier. You do what must be done and you live with the weight of it afterward. On Earth, Dr. Minho had returned to teaching. He worked at a university now, far from the vault and its terrible secrets. He taught ethics in science and technology. He used the war as a case study. How good intentions could create monsters. How knowledge without wisdom was dangerous. His students were fascinated and horrified by the stories he told. The weapons that had been developed, the lines that had been crossed, the moment when creation became destruction. The vault still exists, Minho told his class one day. The weapons are still there, sealed away again but not destroyed. We cannot destroy knowledge. Once something is known, it is known forever. So the question becomes, what do we do with dangerous knowledge? A student raised her hand. Could it happen again? Could we build those weapons again? Yes, Minho said. That is the truth we must face. We will always have the capacity for terrible things. The question is not can we, but will we? And that choice must be made again and again every day by every generation. He had also become an advisor to a new organization, the Galactic Weapons Commission. Multiple species working together to monitor dangerous technologies, to establish standards, to prevent future arms races. It was difficult work. Every species had secrets. Every government wanted advantages. But slowly progress was being made. Transparency instead of secrecy. Cooperation instead of competition. Admiral Daewon had retired immediately after the war ended. He lived quietly now in a small house near the ocean. He spent his days writing. His history of the war was nearly complete. Thousands of pages documenting every decision, every battle, every choice. He did not write it as propaganda. He wrote it as a warning. Future generations needed to understand what had happened, needed to see the costs, needed to learn from the mistakes. He corresponded regularly with Commander Zorath. Two old soldiers, once enemies, now friends. They compared their perspectives on battles they had both fought. They discussed what could have been done differently. They shared their regrets. One day, Zorath sent him a message that made Daewon smile. Young Rek were reading human military history now. Not to learn how to fight humans, but to understand how warfare worked. Human military academies were accepting Rek students. Some of them wanted to learn from the species that had defeated them. Strange, Daewon wrote back. We fought to prove we were dangerous. Now we teach others how we did it. Perhaps that is the real victory, not defeating you, but learning to share knowledge instead of using it as a weapon. Ambassador Soy had become one of the most influential diplomats in the galaxy. She worked tirelessly to reform the Galactic Coalition. The old system had failed to prevent the war. It needed to change. She advocated for a new conflict resolution system, early intervention, mediation, economic incentives for peace, military consequences for aggression. The goal was to prevent future wars before they started. Many species supported her reforms. They had seen what happened when diplomacy failed. They did not want another war like the human-Vrek conflict. The reforms passed. The coalition was reorganized. It had more authority now, more tools to prevent conflicts, but also more accountability, more transparency. Soy also worked to rebuild Earth's relationships with other species. The war had made many aliens fear humanity. She needed to show them that humans were not monsters, that they could be trusted, that the violence had been necessary but not desired. It was slow work. Trust once broken was hard to rebuild, but gradually, species that had isolated themselves from humanity began to engage again. Trade resumed. Cultural exchanges restarted. The galaxy was learning to see humans as people again, not just as weapons. The Vrek homeworld had transformed. The old empire was gone. In its place was the Vrek Federation, a democratic government. It was messy and inefficient and constantly arguing. But it was also free. Young Vrek grew up learning about the war, about Warlord Craxus and his arrogance, about the mistake of dismissing warnings, about the price their species paid for aggression. Some were angry. They blamed humans for the destruction, but most understood that their own leaders had started the war, that the humans had warned them. That pride and arrogance had brought catastrophe. In schools across the Federation, children studied the war as a lesson in consequences. They learned about the importance of listening, of respecting others, of understanding that appearing weak was not the same as being weak. Ambassador Thelvar had also written a book about the war. Hers focused on the Coalition's failure, how they had dismissed human warnings, how they had allowed the Vrek to attack, how their inaction had enabled the violence. Her book was controversial. Many Coalition members did not like being criticized, but it sparked important conversations about responsibility, about when to intervene, about the cost of neutrality. She and Soy had become friends. Two diplomats from different species, working together to make the galaxy safer. They met regularly to discuss reforms and challenges. Do you think it will last? Thelvar asked during one meeting. The peace. The reforms. Can we really prevent another war? I do not know, Soyi admitted. But we have to try. The alternative is unthinkable. One day the Galactic Coalition received a message from the edge of known space. A new species had been discovered. They were technologically advanced. They had a history of warfare. Some coalition members immediately became nervous. They remembered what happened with humanity. An emergency session was called. Delegates argued about how to approach the new species. Some wanted containment. Others wanted careful observation. A few suggested preemptive contact with strict limits. Ambassador Soyi stood to speak. The chamber fell silent. Everyone wanted to hear what humanity would say. We should approach them openly, Soyi said, with honesty, with respect. We should not make them hide what they are. We should not force them to prove themselves through violence. But what if they are dangerous? Someone asked. What if they are like humans? Then they are like humans, Soyi said calmly. And we will treat them with the respect we wish we had received. We will not force them to choose between appearing weak or revealing their strength. We will give them the chance to integrate peacefully. And if they threaten anyone, we will respond. But we will not create the threat by assuming it exists. The chamber debated for hours, but eventually they voted. The new species would be contacted openly, peacefully, with full transparency about the galaxy they were joining. It was a small victory, but an important one. The galaxy was learning. Years later, Captain Hana stood on the bridge of her exploration vessel. Her crew was half human, half wreck. They had just made first contact with the new species. It had gone well. Both sides were curious, cautious, but peaceful. She sent a message back to Earth, to Admiral Day-Wan, telling him about the contact, about how it had been peaceful, about how both sides had approached with trust instead of fear. Day-Wan read the message in his home by the ocean. He looked out the window at the garden. Flowers from Earth and the wreck homeworld grew together in the same soil. Different species, different origins, but thriving together. He thought about everything that had happened, the warnings that were ignored, the war that followed, the terrible things humanity had done, the choice to stop, the long, hard work of building peace. He opened his history document and wrote the final words. We cautioned the galaxy that we were holding back. They ignored our plea and they paid the price. But we paid a price too, in lives lost, in innocence destroyed, in the revelation of our darkest capabilities. The true victory was not defeating the wreck, it was stopping ourselves. That is the lesson humanity offers the galaxy. Power without restraint is catastrophe, but restraint without power is vulnerability. The path between them is narrow and we walk it still. We are not peaceful. We are restrained. We are not weak. We are experienced. We have been fighting wars for thousands of years, but we have also been choosing peace for just as long. Both are part of who we are. Remember the 40,000 who died on New Sol. Remember why we fought, but also remember why we stopped. Remember that humanity's greatest strength is not our capacity to destroy, but our ability to choose not to. That is what makes us human. Not our weapons, not our tactics, not our victories, but our choices. And the choice to be better than our worst capabilities. He saved the document and closed it. His work was done. The story was told. Future generations would read it and make their own choices. Outside, the sun was setting. The ocean waves rolled in, endless and patient. Day-Wan sat on his porch and watched the light fade. He was old now, tired, but also at peace. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity had learned theirs. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone warned that they were holding back, people would listen. Because the price of ignoring such warnings was far too high. For everyone.